Uh, Hello, Trit Kaur. Very good evening.
Okay.
Good evening, sir.
आवाज आ रही सर मेरी? Yes.
Yes. I am audible to you, Trip?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, how are you?
I'm good, sir. How are you?
We are also good. So, Trip, uh, let's start your interview. I have gone through your biodata, and it's one of the very wonderful. You are a student of English literature, and after that, you have gone for your MPhil, and particularly you have did your MPhil in modern South Asian study, and that is from one of the very prestigious university, that is Cambridge University. So a student who's educated from Cambridge and a student of English literature, why you are coming to the civil services into the government services here? Why did not you want to explore your own field? You are a student of literature, you can go for journalism, you can work for many international organizations, and even you are working also, UNICEF is also one part of it. So why you are shifting your career, your education and all these kind of things from this way to the civil services?
Sir, the primary reason is personal satisfaction. And for me, personal satisfaction can come from something that has any kind of social impact or public good. So even though I got the opportunity to continue for a PhD, my supervisors invited me to continue for a PhD and get into academia. I believe that I needed to transition fields to something that has direct social impact. And that's why I returned to India and started working in the development sector. For public service through the government routes, specifically, there are two reasons. One is that government service means that you are also accountable to the public, and that whatever you are doing, you have to answer for it. Because the government runs on public faith and also in fact on public funds. The second reason is, sir, that I was inspired by the work of Sri Mohinder Singh Randhawa ji. I had the opportunity to translate his autobiography called Aap Beeti into English from Punjabi. And so I was greatly inspired by the breadth of work that he accomplished as a civil servant.
Okay. Trip, तो आप एक चीज मेंशन कर रहे थे कि you would like to do some kind of public service. That is why you are interested to go for this civil services and want to join as a PCS officer. But again, the question arises: if your interest is in the public service, why did not you was doing it earlier? Why you went for the Cambridge and doing all these kind of things? I mean to say कि ये जो public service का जो आपका interest है, ये कब बना? Was it after completing the Cambridge या ये शुरू से ही था?
Sir, I was interested both in writing and research and in public service ever since I was a child. But I excelled more in writing and research. And I only had that exposure throughout school and throughout college. So, and I got really strongly involved in academia as well, because I would learn so much through evidence-based research and policy making. But once I actually tried my hand at it, I realized that there was a very strong disjunct between what we study and what is practiced on the ground. So my understanding of society remained very theoretical, and it was, in my opinion, incomplete. So, I recall that what I had enjoyed the most about my research was my fieldwork, which was working with the people who I wanted to support and help out. So in terms of when my interest actually came up, sir, it must have been there from the beginning, but it actually got finalized and it got honed once I tried out the other option.
Okay, well, suppose if you not selected for the PCS, it's being a competitive examination. If you did not get selected for the PCS job, then how you will serve your public cause? What you will do?
Sir, I'll keep on working for either multilateral organizations that are working in India in different projects, or work with NGOs or in the development sector in a way that allows me to keep on serving the public through whatever means possible. And if I don't clear it this time, sir, I'll try again.
Okay. Hello, Tarival Saab. Very good evening.
It's good morning at my end, but yeah, good evening.
Okay. So, Tript, we have a Barrister Tariwal ji. He's from Canada. He has just joined with us. Tariwal sir, she is a Tript Kaur, a very competing student going for PCS. And we have just started our interview.
Good evening, sir.
Hi.
Okay. So, Tripat, my again questioning is you have given me two versions. One thing you are saying that you want to go for the civil public services and you basically want to go, if you are not selected for the PCS, you will work for many multicultural organization. On the another side, you are saying that I will go for and try again. These are the two self-contradictory answers that you are giving to me. I feel as you are not sure about yourself that what you actually want to do.
Sir, I would in fact say that these are complementary solutions. My ultimate aim is to work for public service. What I am doing right now is that I'm working with a multilateral organization for a project to empower youth in Punjab, and at the same time sitting for government exams. I believe that government exams are the best route, in my opinion, for public service because of the accountability element they have. But at the same time, sir, I don't want to say sit back and keep preparing for years without contributing my bit to society. So I want to keep on at the same time, say, working with NGOs or working with multilateral organizations, so that I can keep contributing in my own way alongside.
Okay, you are working with UNICEF, right?
Yes, sir.
In the recent past, I see that United Nations as an international organization, it has failed miserably because whatever the issue, I can take it. Just like you can talk about Myanmar issue. It was doing nothing over the Rohingya issue. Even the recent happening, whatever happening in the Syria, whatever happening in the Middle East, whatever happening in the recent Israel-Palestinian conflict, United Nations has proved to be just a mute spectator. As you are a working employee of one of the agency of the United Nations organization, that how you see the role of United Nations International Organization in the present international context, particularly the state conflict issue. Do you think UNO is playing a satisfactory role, or it is just like a puppet in the hand of some few major countries of the world?
Sir, I think divide my answer into two sections. One would be the angle of political statehood and how the UN works on that, and the other would be the development angle, which is what I work for and which is what I think the UN has considerable success in. In terms of the first part of this answer, sir, I do agree with the fact that there are a few powerful countries, especially the P5, that very strongly control UN agendas. But with bodies like the General Assembly, with say constant representation that we get in the Security Council every 2 years, with other bodies like ECOSOC, bodies like say the International Court of Justice, there are other elements to the United Nations which have had let's say, a certain degree of success. For example, with the Myanmar issue, sir, with the Rohingya Muslim refugees, we saw that the International Court of Justice did hold the Myanmar government accountable. Similarly, sir, for other cases as well, it was the UN that I think around 70 years ago worked to support for garner greater support for a two-state solution in case of Israel-Palestine. It was the UN that worked to end the Korean conflict from 1950 to 1953. And Indian contribution to the UN also has been similarly helpful for say peacekeeping operations in the Democratic Republic of Congo, in terms of even extending aid to countries in conflict. Say the UN has Palestine is one of the cases that the UN supports very strongly in terms of offering funding, and India also contributes immensely to that. But in terms of holding countries accountable for conflict, there have been issues that the UN would need to address. For instance, the United Nations Human Rights Council has not been able to hold many countries accountable for human rights violations. Similarly, a few countries have been determining the nuclear agenda by taking the UN, by pushing it through the UN itself. So, sir, on that front, there have been cases where then there can be improvements. Sir, coming to the other side of my answer, do you want to say something, sir? Sorry.
No. Continue, please. Continue.
Okay, sir. Sir, the other side of my answer is that I work in the development angle of the UN. So organizations like the United Nations Development Program, like UNICEF, like UN Women, like UNESCO, very strongly contribute to local projects and programs for human development. They run programs for civic engagement, providing employment and economic support opportunities, even working for, say, a WASH, that is sanitation and healthcare rights, sexual and reproductive rights through UNFPA, etc. So, sir, on these fronts, the UN, because the UN is based on international consensus building, the UN has been able to provide enough support, great support, in fact, sir, for social, economic, and cultural issues.
Okay, in the recent time, you know that recently the German has accepted that yes, it committed genocide in Namibia in the year 1894 to 1915. Basically, the Namibia was under the part of the German at that time, and the Namibian people they basically genocide Herero and Namo group. There are some particular people, and 80% population got eliminated in Namibia. In the recent time, German, as in officially accepted it. Yes, our people are official. We have committed genocide in Namibia, and we are ready to pay compensation. Now they have given some particular amount also, that somewhere right 30 billion and dollars, something like that. That would be given for the next few years. That it will be developed over infrastructure, health, and all this kind of thing in the Namibia. My question is compensating monetary wise to an event like a genocide is justified? You commit genocide approximately 50 or 100 years earlier, and after that you accept it. Yes, it is fine. We did it. Now we are ready to pay you. So is it the right way to get compensating for the genocide if the monetary help is given? As because you are working in UNICEF.
Sir,
so,
I don't think
you are working in genocide, in UNICEF, and you know that any kind of civil war and genocide happens, the children and the women, they are the first victim. So monetary compensation is somewhere justified for any kind of genocide event?
Sir, I don't think there can be any satisfactory compensation for genocide in general. But what has been seen in most cases is that acknowledgement of a genocide, taking responsibility for it, is the first step. The second is something that we saw in South Africa with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, wherein both the sides, the aggressor and the victim, or if both are aggressors and both aggressors, they come to the dialogue table, and it's a sort of like a socially cathartic activity, wherein they talk about the pain and the suffering that they have caused. That is the next step. The third step, sir, is to offer any kind of support. That support could be monetary. Support could be in terms of constant aid. This, in fact, sir, is what India has also been asking the UK for its gory colonial past, for incidents like the Jallianwala Bagh incident and so on. And this is the same demand that Jews have also raised from Germany. So, sir, I would say that you are completely correct. It is nothing can justify a genocide, nothing can compensate for it. But taking no steps at all would also not be the right solution.
Okay. Thank you, Tribal. Over to Professor Sheetal.
Good evening, sir. Now, you plan to join the Punjab Civil Services, and you have a background, you have experience in the developmental sector. What are the social aspects, or what are the societal aspects, I would say, in Punjab that you feel are in greater need of any help from the public service, in the sense of, or let me put it this way: is in Punjab there is enough space for ideas like multiculturalism, ideas like emancipation, social equality? How much of that is lacking in Punjab, and how can an official of the state, a public servant, be helpful in this regard?
Sir, I believe that one of the core burning issues in Punjab in terms of social equality is that of gender, sir. There is a great level of gender-based violence, and that violence is not only limited to incidents like physical incidents or physical violence, but it is ingrained in the social structure. Even though we have equal property rights for women, even though we have equal access to education and employment, we still see low labor force participation of women. We still continue to see a lot of women giving up property rights. We still see a lot of women affected by domestic violence, whether that may be physical or psychological. I mean, every time there is an issue in Punjab related to women's security, there is a huge furore, but then it dies down, and soon a new issue comes up related to women's safety and empowerment. So I believe that, sir, in Punjab, Punjab also has a strong patriarchal culture. So that's why we don't see, it is only recently that we have started seeing Lodi being celebrated for girls' births and so on. So, sir, I believe that that would be the first core issue that would need addressal. Other issues would be, sir, related to employment, sir. There is a very strong gap between demand and supply in Punjab. We have very highly qualified candidates, but we don't have enough jobs or job creation. And that is also encouraging so much migration abroad. That's not one of the reasons for migration, but it is a very important one. When the residents of your state don't believe that they have enough, say, employment opportunities, or the grass is greener on the other side, only then do they migrate. So, sir, that would be the second problem that we would need to address. In terms of what I have seen recently that the Punjab government has done, the PGR Calm portal that they've launched has sort of matched this, try to fill this demand-supply mismatch. They have been organizing job melas, etc. But we need to have more white-collar jobs instead of blue-collar jobs, because Punjabi youths have high aspirations and high qualifications. And so there is greater need for, say, investment. There is greater need to set up KPOs, BPOs, a larger IT sector, and so on. This would be my take, sir.
So, yeah, but there are two things that come out of your answer. One, what can public official do if the state needs investment? So how can you say that there needs to be greater investment in sectors where high skills can be absorbed, the people with higher skills can be absorbed. One, what can the public servant do to make the state more conducive for investment? Number two, you talked about migration, and migration being a push factor where people see places where their own place is not able to offer them good enough opportunities. So is this idea of not being good enough, is that enough of a factor in making people migrate or encouraging people to migrate?
So for investment, the main problem that, we also saw in the Ease of Doing Business Index that the World Bank sort of publishes, was that there is a lot of there are a lot of bureaucratic hurdles. Like, for example, it is easier for a person to buy a gun and to register that than to, say, register a business. If we look at examples like New Zealand, etc., they have cut down on they have made the process of contractual obligations very simple and very straightforward, which is what encourages investments. Sir, what I have seen recently in Punjab with respect to investments and FDI is that the Invest Punjab program has been trying to bring in interested external or interested MNCs, etc., to invest more in Punjab. In order to make Punjab a very sort of attractive investment destination, we need to also set up powerful SEZs, powerful special economic zones. We don't need a lot of them, but we need one large one, similar to so that there is so that it sort of works as an agglomeration of industries. That would be another example, sir. Apart from this, sir, on the migration question, sir, could you repeat so that I can answer it better?
What I was trying to ask you was that, you said that it is because of lack of opportunities back home that there is migration that might happen, right? So Punjab needs to improve itself if it wants to, have lesser migration. But these are known as push factors, where the situation at home is so bad that, the migration is is a good option to consider in that context. There might also be pull factors. There might be reasons other than, there might be things that are very good about other places which we are not supposed to replicate, or which might not be beneficial for us to replicate back home, right? So how can migration be seen in terms of as something that we can reduce or we should stop. Why should we, in the first place, we try to control migration? What if there's a certain skill set that is needed or required at a certain place and it finds its own place? What's wrong with it? Punjab receives a lot of migrants also from other states, from other places. So what's wrong with that? Why not accept the idea of migration as an organic idea, which is a part of public life?
So I completely agree with your statement. Migration is an organic idea and it is part of public life. Punjab does attest to that fact, considering its long history of migrations. Even with respect to, sir, the push and pull factors that you're talking about, I believe that those who want to migrate for the pull factors in other countries should have the complete right and the complete support of the government, because a lot of them also contribute back to their state in their own unique ways. Some of them contribute by sort of supporting their villages in setting up educational or health infrastructure. Some of them contribute by sort of promoting Punjabi culture abroad. And many of them have become great political leaders. They've become economic leaders, business leaders abroad. So the idea is to sort of support migration for those who want to migrate, but to prevent distress migration. And by preventing distress migration, I mean, sir, that those who do not want to migrate but are migrating because they find that there is a lack of there's a lack of opportunities in their state. It is those people that we can support directly through our education and our employment policies. So that's what I mean. Sir, in fact, UNICEF last year only conducted a survey among Punjabi youth regarding their interest in migration, especially in the COVID context. And so more than 70% of Punjabi youths that we studied said that they do not want to migrate and that they want to work in their own state, provided they get, say, white collar or good quality job opportunities.
Okay, you mentioned UNICEF, you are a part of the developmental sector, that's nice. If we look at the idea of what development is in this context and what social development is in particular, is the idea of social development as we understand it in the international context a product of the inputs from the international south, or does it have a dominant element of how the idea of social development is looked at by the more developed parts of the world, in inverted commas, by the global north, as it is referred to? So I would want your take on that. So are the perceptions universal? It doesn't matter whether the opinion comes from the global north or from the global south, they would converge and the idea of social development would end up being very similar. What is your take on that?
So that's a really interesting question. Sir, to my understanding, the notion of development has evolved over time. So it did begin from, say, the global north acting a charity figure for the global south, and it did begin from the global north offering welfare and support. But over time it has evolved. So now, I mean, since Amartya Sen's work on the capabilities approach, we now are looking at development that keeps human rights, that keeps needs, choices, consent, and opportunities at the center of any kind of support that the system is giving. So you are correct, sir, in thinking that there is a convergence between what the global south aspires for itself and what the global north claims to offer in terms of aid. But I believe that this evolution has been very productive, because earlier the way we understood development was mostly in terms of offering aid or offering support to those who we saw as passive recipients. But now we see development as aiding those who are unable to access equitable life opportunities because of inequitable social systems. So, sir, I would completely agree with your statement.
Okay, so where have you grown up?
Sir,
Where have you been to school? Where have you been to school? Where have you spent a larger part of your early life?
Sir, I've grown up in Mohali. I completed my schooling till class 8 in Mohali, and then from class 9 to 12 in Chandigarh. And after that, I went to Delhi for my undergrad and then went to the UK for my master's.
Right. So you have an experience of living in societies in very diverse places. Can we look at, since there's a close association with Punjab, since the roots appear to be in Punjab, can you say something about history and the role Punjab has played in ancient and medieval times in the historical evolution and development of this country when it comes to specific issues. I'm not asking, trying to ask from you a very broad-based sort of a question. I want to specifically understand how this medieval and modern history of Punjab has affected the social scenario in Punjab as a whole.
Right, sir. So, to my understanding, because of Punjab's unique location, it has been the gateway for many civilizations to enter and interact with India in general. Before the evolution of sea routes and trade through sea routes. In terms of ancient times, sir, I believe that Punjab was one of the, in fact, because of the fertility of the Punjab region, and after the advent of the Aryans, a lot of ancient kingdoms like Madra, like Gandhar, etc., extended over the Punjab region. And we even have cases of, sir, ancient kings like Porus, who were from the Punjab region, who inspired invaders like Alexander with their military prowess. In the medieval times, sir, Punjab specifically, I see as like as a place where there was great confluence of ideas, and that's why we see the emergence of bhakti traditions. We see the emergence of the Sufi movement. We see the emergence of Sikhism in the first place because of that beautiful syncretic convergence of ideas. In not just in the realm of philosophy, sir, but also in terms of culture, sir. I had, in fact, this is an interesting incident that I encountered, I think 2 years back. I was in Brussels for a conference and I met somebody who calls themselves Romani. And when we started talking, she started referring to her eye as ak and nose as nak, and started counting in terms of ik, do, tin. And I asked, because she looked like a white person. So I asked her where she was from, and she said that she was from a nomadic tribe that used to live in Punjab in the ancient times, but had migrated over time and were now settled in Europe. So that, I think, is the beauty of the confluence of cultures that Punjab offers by being the gateway, by being a gateway.
All right, thank you very much. Now, over to Mr. Sandhu for the further talk.
So let's say you were to be appointed as a PCS officer during the current times, and let's assume that I am a businessman in the States or Canada, and you've been charged with the duty of convincing me to come to visit Punjab as an investor during the pandemic. How would you sell Punjab to me?
Sir, what business are you running?
Let's say I am in the energy sector, and I'm looking for investment opportunities in the energy sector, because that's what Canada is focusing currently, from what I know. Let's say, okay, I'll make it even simpler for you. Let's say I am thinking of setting up a solar power plant which supplies energy to cities somewhere in the world. And you want to convince me that Punjab is the ideal place during the current pandemic with all its restrictions and lockdowns. How do I feel safe, and how do I feel that Punjab will be profitable for me?
Right. So first of all, solar energy has been greatly promoted in Punjab across sectors. So we have started seeing solar energy being used in the agriculture sector with pump sets and so on, which is also being promoted by government schemes wherein subsidized technology has been given to farmers. Apart from that, sir, solar energy is part of renewable energy, which is part of government schemes that make it essential for there to be certain renewable purchase obligations for all power consumers. And that essentially means that solar energy is bound to be bought by discoms in the state. So you have a ready market that is already in place, and that will not falter simply because of the regulatory system, because India is trying to shift towards more renewable energy. Sir, to continue the answer,
Yes.
there is lesser reluctance on the part of the common public to invest in solar technology because they've seen that there have been immediate returns in, say, reduced in reduced electricity bills every year once they set up once they do the initial investment for setting up solar plants. So, sir, I believe at the level of public perception there is little reluctance. At the level of government regulation, there is a very strong promotion, and at the level of demand also there is great demand for solar energy. So it would be great if you would invest.
Okay. Okay, fine, Tript. Your answering is very good, and the way you interact with the panelist is very good. Just wait for 1 minute, and we will give you the final feedback. Okay, Tript, your interview is over, and the way you communicate, with the way you interact, and the way you answer all the questions is very good. Your confidence, your positivity of mind, and the way you take the question is very good. That is one of the very positivity here. But on the academic side, you have well read. आप बहुत अच्छा पढ़ा हुआ आपने, and आपका उसके ऊपर काफी अच्छा है. But one thing I find it कि you need to work more on the ground reality of the Punjab. Somewhere you should be very much aware about the ground reality of the Punjab, because where I find, as a panelist, we find something is lacking there. As Dhariwal sir has just put you one question over the solar panel and all this kind of thing, you are welcoming, and but you know what happened in Punjab in the recent time, the Punjab government has launched a scheme where the agriculture land could be leased for the use of solar plant. But this scheme was miserably failed. No doubt it was way back 5 years earlier, but ये scheme पूरी तरह से flop हुई. The people did not respond as much as should to the solar energy power in Punjab. So somewhere you need to work more over the ground reality, and basic जो पंजाब के issues हैं वहाँ पे आपका जो है otherwise थोड़ा और होना चाहिए. जो reality है उसके बारे में you need to work out more there. Otherwise everything is fine, you are doing very good, और confidence level बहुत अच्छा है, and we hope कि आप इंटरव्यू में बहुत अच्छा वर्कआउट करोगे. एंड क्योंकि आप एक एकेडमिक से बहुत अच्छी बैकग्राउंड से आते हैं, लिटरेचर के स्टूडेंट हैं, तो वी आर एक्सपेक्टिंग कि आपने मेंस में भी बहुत अच्छा लिखा होगा, और मेंस के जो भी आपके सब्जेक्ट रहेंगे वहाँ पे उसमें आपने काफ़ी अच्छा स्कोर जो है वो वहाँ पे करेंगे, और उसी के अगेंस्ट यू विल गो फॉर इंटरव्यू, एंड इंटरव्यू इज गोइंग टू बी वेरी गुड. और थोड़ा सा ग्राउंड रियलिटी के ऊपर पंजाब की और वर्कआउट कीजिए. सो दैट इज आवर फाइनल कॉल. As a panelist, we are giving you 7 out of 10. So we are satisfied with the way you are answering, with the way of your positivity. So good wishes are with you, right?
Thank you, sir.
And if you feel any kind of problem and any kind of issue, you can discuss with us. Anything you would like to ask the other panelists?
Setia sir, your questions are really interesting, and they pushed me into thinking in very different directions. So I really appreciate that, sir.
Thank you so much, sir.
I mean, they were very holistic questions. Rather than just say asking for a yes or no answer, they pushed me to thinking what could be different policy possibilities. Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
And Dhaliwal sir, I had not expected that I'd be asked to sell Punjab for any business of any kind. But that is pretty much what my role would be if I do get selected eventually. Even if I don't, this is, I think, a great way to learn how to do it. Thank you.
Okay.
Here's a suggestion for you, Tript. What you're doing right now, you're forming a connection with me and Mr. Setia here. I think you have to figure out ways of doing the same during the interview. I think this is a very good approach that you're taking right now. You're literally engaging both Mr. Setia and myself.
Okay, sir. I'll try, sir, but I've heard that the panel is really formal and like they don't want to talk about anything other than whatever the questions they're asking are, and apparently they're also scary. So I've been trying to avoid any kind of informality in the way I behave.
That's a good thing, but I mean, for a person that appears before scary people every day as a lawyer,
Yeah,
there are ways of doing it. It's just, it comes with time and experience.
yes, sir. And Sandhu sir, thank you so much. Even the previous session you did with me, after that I changed the way I was thinking and talking. I hope the change was visible. If it was not, I'd make sure it's there more often. And like really thank you. I mean, I did another mock yesterday and it didn't go really well. Like I was told that I have lofty ideas and no substance. And so I was quite dejected after that. But today I feel like there is some possibility of hope and that I can, if
No,
I
no,
work
no,
on
no.
some issues, and so on.
You're very good on the academic side. You are very good, and you are the way you communicate your idea. That is all very good. Little bit, what do you find, because you have spent one of the major part in the studying in Cambridge and all these kind of things. So that what point I can see that you are not as much as connected with the ground reality of Punjab as a civil servant. You know, one if a person is preparing for the civil service, UPSC and all kind of the Punjab State Civil Service, he or she is mostly spending at least 2 to 3 years studying all the current affair and all the issues that are related
Yes,
to
sir.
the Punjab State. So that is the one another different issue, but you can do it easily. That's not a bigger problem there. So little bit you explore more over the Punjab and all the current problem and try to find out some practical answer for that. That will be fine, and you are doing very good in the interview, and our best wishes are with you, and we are very much confident that you are going to make the selection in PCS.
Thank you
Very
so
good.
much, sir. Thank
Right?
you.
Be confident, and if you feel any kind of problem, you feel free to contact me. We will help you also.
Thank you, sir.
Right?
Sir, I would maybe need help on the Punjab ground realities if you have a
No problem.
compilation or something.
No problem. No problem. You can contact me anytime, and I
Okay,
will.
sir. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Have a
Okay.
good
Take
day.
care. All the. Okay.
Bye bye.
Okay. Please.